let's talk about where the Giants currently stand. 1-3 coming out of the first 4 games. We talk about, we don't do the woulda, coulda, shoulda, but they certainly had opportunities to have a different record. The problem is that when you look forward for the New York Football Giants on their schedule, starting with the Seattle Seahawks, who can certainly give up points, but also put up a lot of points, it's hard to look forward here and think about the Seahawks, the Bengals and Eagles at home, and then the Pittsburgh Steelers. Do you feel, before you get back to that division battle, maybe with the division leaders at that point in the Washington Commanders, do you feel differently about the next 4 games than we did in the offseason when you first looked at the schedule and said, well, where can the Giants be successful? Does this feel like fertile ground maybe for the Giants to turn things around?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's you asked
Go
two
ahead, Andy,
specific questions that may not have the same exact answer, Adam. So like, let me break those apart for a second and just say, in looking at these next 4 games feel like, just based on the opponent and how they have played so far, that these games give the Giants a better opportunity to win than I thought going into it. We thought we see that the Bengals, while they turn things around a little bit against the Panthers, what's there to say about beating the Panthers right now at this moment? It feels like they need to get their sea legs underneath them. They have not yet. So if you were going to play the Bengals, maybe earlier in the season is better. The Philadelphia Eagles, like, I want to play them while they still have Nick Sirianni. Does that make sense?
Sure,
I don't like.
Sure.
While he's still the head coach,
running down. That thing's ticking away pretty fast here. It feels like.
I mean, halfway through the season, he may not be the coach anymore. So I want to play them, and that gives us our best chance to win. Obviously, we know Devonta Smith is injured. AJ Brown has missed the last few weeks. We're unsure when he's going to come back. So like, that game looks a little bit more winnable. Now, Seattle looks actually better than we thought slightly, and I think the Steelers look better. But the Steelers are always going to be competitive. We always knew the Steelers were going to be at least 500. They're 3-1. A couple close games kind of go their way. But it does feel like there is an opportunity for the Giants to potentially go 2-2 in this next four-game stretch if the same types of things consistently happen with their opponents. Now, you asked me, like, does this end up being fertile ground for the Giants? No, it's not fertile ground. There's no game on the schedule that you look at the Giants, you're like, that's a win. That's what, like, we're not anywhere. We're not the Chiefs. We're not other teams where you can just point to wins and losses. And so for me, it's like, I think the Giants have the ability to be competitive. I think they can steal away 2 games in the next 4. But tell me that you're more bullish than I am and that you think that they could win 3 of the next 4 games.
No, I mean, it's really hard. You know, that Pittsburgh game is really interesting because it's such an incredibly talented defense. You go and look at the games that they're winning, the scores that they're winning by, and you just think, oh, okay, you know, the Giants have shown against teams that are struggling or kind of coming and going a little bit that they can hang in those games and be in one possession contests. I actually might be a little bit more concerned about Pittsburgh, that like, as they continue to grow with Justin Fields and with Pickens and they develop that relationship, if the offense starts to come along there, that defense is already dominant. You mentioned the Cincinnati Bengals, like, okay, I get it, but even in losses against the Chiefs, they put up 25. They lost to the Commanders, where they put up 33. They beat the Panthers. They're bad, fine, but put up 34. Like, they're putting up a lot of points right now. So again, it comes back to, how do I feel about what the Giants are doing right now and whether or not they're capable of winning these games? And that extends right to the most, current matchup with the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, maybe the Eagles almost feel, because of the QB play, because of the coaching situation, that actually might feel like one of the games that I'd say, oh my God, is some world where at home the Giants could surprise the Eagles? Maybe. But I there's just no way to put a stamp of winnable game on there right now for the Giants. And frankly, I'll use the Cowboys game as the reference point. I think that every time any team sees the Giants, they go, oh, good. We'll get a win here. We'll get right here, right? We can clean some things up here. Dallas wasn't perfect, but they still got the win. There was no point in that Thursday night game that either you or I or any Giants fan thought they were going to win that football game. And that's what I think it really represents. And until I see this team show up in a big way, specifically on offense, I cannot look at any game on their schedule right now and think that there's an opportunity for them to win it. They put up 6, they put up 18, 21, and 15. They are not a potent offense. They are not a dynamic offense beyond Malik Neighbors right now. No, the next 4 games do not get me excited. 2-2, I think, would be incredible. And I would sign up for that right now, because 3-5 would feel like a real turnaround for this team midway through the year.
Oh, think about what you just said. Adam, you just said 3-5 feels like a win for the Giants, right? Like based on how the season has gone so far, that is just frustrating and it is maddening. But to your point, these are teams that the Bengals have been in the Super Bowl recently. The Philadelphia Eagles have been in the Super Bowl recently. The Steelers have not been under 500 in forever.
Yeah.
Seattle is making the playoffs and Geno Smith's playing well. So, like,
Yep.
when you're given the benefit of the doubt in these next 4 games, to your point, like, you give the benefit of the doubt to anyone that's playing the Giants in these matchups because they're the ones that have consistently shown we'll right the ship or our best play is better than your best play. Like, I don't know. It's really tough. Even the most optimistic lens looks at the Giants and says, if you can find a way to upset either the Steelers or the Seahawks, and then you win one of the games between the Bengals
Oh
and
my
the
God. Yeah.
Eagles,
That'd be
maybe
insane.
that's where we land. But listen, this is what being an irrational fan and staring at this schedule, you squint hard enough, you're like, can they beat Justin Fields? Like, could they? Is Jalen Hurts has the same quarterback rating right now as Daniel Jones? Like, is he not playing very good? Like, you really start squinting, and maybe that's just the irrational person in me.
You better believe it, man. And then, by the way, coming out of those 4, then it's the Commanders again. Then it's the Panthers, that very winnable game in Germany we all talked about before the season started, right? So it's like you try to paint this picture. You try to dream a little dream. And listen, maybe the optimism should prevail that they could have been. We know it's about what happens on Sunday. Maybe if this team was 2-2, we'd be talking about, grinding their way to getting some wins and battling throughout the season. We just need to see them battle and come out with those results. One thing I found interesting, Andrew, speaking of matchups, is Geno Smith has been one heck of a quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. You may remember some time ago, there was a head coach for the New York Football Giants that benched Eli Manning in favor of Geno Smith and seeing what they had in him. It caused a disastrous downfall for the franchise. John Mara did everything he could to make it up to Eli. And in return, Geno Smith went on to become one of the top quarterbacks in the league in Seattle in recent years. And it started getting us thinking, both you and I, about, you look at him, very short sample size in Carolina with Andy Dalton. You think about Joe Flacco walking in for the Colts. You think about Sam Darnold going to Minnesota. You think about maybe Gardner Minshew and what his journey has been. There are a ton of examples of just veteran quarterbacks that seem to be able to go on this very competent and very capable journey in changing teams and moving through their career. And it always relates back, for me at least, to the decision to sign Daniel Jones, and somehow Joe Schoen and the Giants not seeing the forest for the trees of, there are plenty of options. We don't need to commit to a non-top tier quarterback on top tier dollars.
Yeah, I mean, that is the difficult part as you look around the league. One name that you didn't mention was Baker Mayfield, who
Yes.
has
Oh, geez.
looked
Maybe one of the most important ones to mention. Yeah.
I mean, he's got 106 passer rating, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, completing 70% of his passes. He looks awesome, right? Like, he looks great right now. And he was someone that basically got let go by Cleveland, went to Carolina. That was a tire fire. And you know what? The funny thing is, like, you know what I kept thinking about? It's like the Cleveland Browns had Baker Mayfield, and then they cut him for Deshaun Watson. Then when Deshaun Watson got hurt, they had Joe Flacco come in. He helped them win playoffs. And, like, Cleveland has their issues. Then you have the Carolina Panthers. They have Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield on the roster at the same time. They let go of both of them, being like, these guys can't handle it. And maybe it's not so much the players, but it is the organization not being able to develop those players. And you hope that it's not the Giants that can't develop Daniel Jones and you go see him flourish elsewhere. But at some point, you look around the league and you say, the Giants are paying $38 million, almost $40 million for Daniel Jones. And you have all these other alternatives that have seemed to work out, that if you were looking at the next 2.5 years, you said that Daniel Jones was going to be the best suited to lead this team. And now you look around the league and you see the rejuvenation of all of these other quarterbacks you mentioned. Geno Smith obviously is the name that is top of mind, given that we are playing against Seattle in this upcoming game. It just makes you wonder, even past this year, if you decide to move on from Daniel Jones and you don't end up getting a quarterback in the top 3 or the top 5 of the draft, maybe we can go one of these other routes and still be competitive with the roster as it's currently constructed.
Of course, Geno Smith right now leads the league in passing yards. You have Baker Mayfield, 6th overall in passing yards, throwing 8 touchdowns to 2 interceptions to this point. Sam Darnold, obviously, right? 9th in passing yards and also sporting an 11 up, 3 down touchdown to interception ratio. But let's even go that layer deeper because you're mentioning a lot of these other names and Gardner Minshew being one of them. Guess what? Daniel Jones is 13th in the league in passing yards right now. Gardner Minshew's 14th. And Gardner Minshew's throwing for a yard more per pass play than Daniel Jones, in spite of the fact that he's thrown for 219 yards per game and Daniel Jones is thrown for 220. 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions for Jones, 3 up, 3 down for Gardner Minshew. And why is it notable? Not because we think Gardner Minshew is the next coming of Sam Darnold in an opportunity to rejuvenate his career, because, by the way, from a QB rating standpoint, 107 for Daniel Jones, 80 for, oh, sorry, did that one wrong. Almost gave credit where it wasn't due. And this is why you always fact check, Andrew. That's going to be an 80.8 for Daniel Jones and an 88.2 for Gardner Minshew. Who was I reading just above him? That was going to be Jaden Daniels, who's absolutely crushing it right now. It's just this reminder when Gardner Minshew is making pennies on the dollar. And sorry, man, we get things wrong. We acknowledge it. I said that Gardner Minshew was the option that I would have taken instead of signing Daniel Jones to the contract. Not because he was going to lead the Giants to the playoffs and become this next coming of top 5 talent, but because it wasn't going to cost anything. And because it wouldn't have stopped you from making other decisions, like maybe keeping Saquon Barkley, like maybe signing big-time free agents that would have helped improve this roster in totality. The veteran experience for quarterbacks around the league is such a reminder of the mistakes that the Giants have made, how Daniel Jones does not look like right now he's going to be that guy, and the fact that Carolina, that has looked at the place where everybody stops, including Sam Darnold, when you mentioned Baker Mayfield before their journey goes on to greatness, guess what? The Giants are that too. The Giants are as much of that type of organization since the Eli Manning era ended. You have seen Tyrod Taylor, journeyman, solid backup, steps in, performs well for you. Giants didn't bother paying him and keeping him around. You've seen Geno Smith from years ago, goes on to have a great experience. Where are we? I don't know. I guess Tommy DeVito's the next man up. Wait until he gets out of New York, and all of a sudden he'll be playing critical reps for another team around the league. It's bad vibes, man. And we've been pretty negative this week, but guess what? That's how I'm feeling right now about the Giants.
Geno Smith is 10th in QBR right now. You want to know what's crazy? And this is why stats are like just they blow my mind. You have Geno Smith at 10. 11 is Jalen Hurts. He has obviously fallen off from his potential MVP candidacy. CJ Stroud is 12th. He's had a little bit of a slight regression. Then 13th is Baker Mayfield, who we all agree has been playing very well for them. Then it goes at 14 is Daniel Jones, followed by Matt Stafford, Dak Prescott, and Patrick Mahomes. So just exactly where you think in your mind Daniel Jones sits. He sits right in between CJ Stroud, Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott, and Matt Stafford, right? Like going into the season, that's the tiering that you had Daniel Jones in, right?
And naturally, at the end of the day, we'll remind you that in terms of touchdowns thrown, quarterbacks that have thrown 4 of them, Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith, Deshaun Watson, Daniel Jones, Jalen Hurts, Trevor Lawrence, Will Levis, and then just below with 3 is Gardner Minshew and Justin Fields. And it is, to your point, that reminder of the mixed bag, that 4 games of a season. But when you start to look at those names and then you think about their teams and you think about how the fan base feels about them, it's about results, it's about the totality, and it's about maybe the mistakes that the Giants organization have made over the last handful of years that have cost this fan base from not worrying about winning deep playoff games and going on Super Bowl runs, but from just being able to love, support, and get excited for the team each and every game day. That's been robbed from this fan base with consistency. Hopefully, sooner than later, they give it back. Until the next time, friends, when we break down the matchup against the Seattle Seahawks and how the Giants are going to turn all things around on the West Coast, you get us on YouTube, you get us on your podcast feed. We'll be looking at the betting line, talking about fantasy plays, talking about critical matchups and the recent sample size that says this could be a rough one for Big Blue. But until the next time, until the best times, as Andrew Mackwitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.